Welcome to Politics 101. Good evening, I'm David Hines. Today it's a Wednesday, the Wednesday edition of Politics 101. I want to welcome everyone down to our program, the place where we get behind the news. We bring the information, but we bring analysis of the information. It's your program where we look at issues which are of great importance to our Guyana, our Caribbean. Politics 101. Politics 101. Tonight we are going to be talking about labor. You know, we are fast approaching Labor Day. May 1st is on Sunday. That's the day set aside traditionally for workers of the world to observe the importance of labor, to highlight the labor movement. And it has been a tradition in our Guyana for as long as we have had trade unions dating back to the early 1920s. So we're talking almost 100 years. In fact, the first labor union in our Caribbean, the then British Guyana Labor Union, was formed over 100 years ago. And I assume that since then they have been observing Labor Day. So we are going to do our part here this evening in highlighting the importance of labor, look at where the labor movement is, look at labor within the context of contemporary society, contemporary Guyana. So please share the link. I understand that we all come on to the program, but we don't share the link. You know, if there are 500 of us on, please share the link. If 500 of us share the link, that's 2 by 500. We will spread the pool of the program. So welcome wherever you are joining us from. And we are especially grateful to you, the audience. There can be no program without the audience. We can have the most wonderful guests, and we do. We do have informed guests. You have testified to that. We do have very informed discussion last week. I've gotten so much feedback from you last week. The programs we had on analyzing the recent IRI poll. We continue that this week. Last week, we looked at Article 13 of the Constitution. And then we had Professor Thomas, a very insightful program last Thursday. So you do know that we bring on very informed guests who can speak to the issues, who can leave you with a better understanding of the issues, but more than that, about you, the audience, you, the people, and the role that you play. So please do not be stingy. Spread the word so that others can be part of this experience. I notice you all are coming in, and we're gonna have quite a good panel tonight, of course, as you will see in a couple of minutes. We have General Secretary of the TUC, Lincoln Lewis, no stranger, Executive Member of the Working People's Alliance, Takumo Ogunse. And we're going to have a new guest tonight, someone new to Politics 101. We've been trying to get him to come on for quite a bit. We've eventually gotten him, Norris Witter, a name that those of you who've been following the labor movement would know, former president of the Trade Union Congress, president of the General Workers Union, and his name was in the news recently because he's one of the persons that is part of that challenge to the Natural Resource Fund Act that was passed by the PPP recently. And as you know, there's a court case challenging it. A member of the PNC and the chief whip is one of the persons named in that case, Chris Jones. And the other person, Norris Wither, who's asking the court to find that the PPP's lack of consultation with stakeholders is a violation of the Article 13 of the Constitution that we discussed at length last week with Ralph Ramkaran and Nigel Hughes. So we're going to have Mr. Witter on tonight as our new guest. And as usual, as you do with our new guests on this program, you show them immense love. And we expect that you're going to show Mr. Norris Witter the same kind of love that you show here on this program. So welcome to Politics 101. Share the link, share the link, share the link. As I said, we are going to be discussing tonight labor within the context of Labor Day, which is going to be on Sunday. We call it May Day in Guyana. Labor Day is Workers' Day, the day when workers observe the importance of labor. And you know, labor is one of the two major components of the production process. You know, goods and services that we produce. It's said that the two components are capital and labor. And some people argue that production of wealth is dependent on capital. Without capital, there is no creation of wealth. As we know, that is the capitalist view of the production process. That is the prominence of capital, and that capital is indispensable. And some of us argue the opposite. We argue that yes, capital is important, but labor is primary, that it is labor that produces wealth. You can have all the capital that you want. If people's labor power, as opposed to just labor power is indispensable to the creation of wealth. And so therefore, as we talk about policy, when we talk about policy in any society, therefore, we are judging policy, whether the policy starts from the premise that capital is indispensable or labor is indispensable. If you see a government expending disproportionate resources on businesses, giving them all the tax breaks, giving them the tax holidays, giving them all the investment breaks and all of those things, then you see a government is doing that. That government is assuming that it is capital that is primary. And so therefore, to create wealth, you have to invest more in capital. On the other hand, when you see a government invest equally or more in labor, in wages and salaries, in better working conditions for the workers, in ensuring that workers get not just better wages and salary, what about a universal basic income for workers? We've been talking about that recently. Our party, the Working People's Alliance, is on the forefront of arguing that in the presence of real and potential unprecedented wealth because of our oil find, that how you spend that money is important. Are you spending the money on big ticket items, gas to shore, Amelia project, and all those big ticket items that we're hearing about, Skeldon, and all those things? Or are you spending it on ensuring that the back pay that is owed to workers going right back to the Middle Passage 300, 400 years ago, when the workers were paid nothing, and after emancipation in 1838, when the workers were paid little or nothing? And so therefore, are you ensuring that for the first time in the history of our country, working people, not just those who are unemployed, but those who are underemployed and those who are unemployed, because the unemployed are workers too, they are potential workers, they're part of the pool of workers. Are we going to ensure that on top of the meager wages and salary which they now get, are they going to be guaranteed a basic income? Guyana is full of land. Are workers going to be given house lots? Are they going to be given house lots at a reduced cost? So the welfare of workers is not just the wages and salaries, but it's a whole heap of other things. Labor is indispensable. Labor is indispensable. That is our argument here on this program. And we are asking, therefore, what is the state of the workers' movement, what we call the trade union movement? Before there was the mass political party as we know them today, the PNCs, PPPs, and the AFCs, and the WPAs, and the WPJs, and the PNMs, and the DLP. Before there were those organizations, there was the labor union. I said the first labor union in the English-speaking Caribbean was formed here in Guyana over 100 years ago, the British Guyana Labor Union, what is today known as the Guyana Labor Union. And it was those unions in the 1930s that organized workers to take action in their own name, not just to better working conditions in the colonies, but to question the continuance of colonialism. Hence, in the 1930s, we have now what is known as the 1930s uprisings, the 1930s disturbances, and the colonials call it the 1930s riots. From Bahamas and Jamaica in the north right down to Grenada, Trinidad and Guyana in the south. Workers throughout the decade of the 1930s rose up and signaled to the colonial masters that enough was enough, striking the last decisive blow against colonialism. And it was the actions of the workers led by the workers' unions that led to the formal decolonization movement. Before the political party, there was the trade union. Before the Burnhams and the Jagans, who we speak always about as the fathers of the nation, there was the labor leader, Hubert Nathaniel Critchlow. He was the founding father. With all due respect to Mr. Burnham and Mr. Jagan, Dr. Jagan, and the others that came later, we know them because the political parties talk about them. The butlers of Trinidad, the Ciprianis, and the host of others across our Caribbean. They were the founding fathers of our independence. Each union had a political arm, and it was the political arm of the unions that really became the political parties. That really became the political parties. Workers of the world, unite, you have nothing to lose but your chains. The battle cry of workers across the world. There is power in labor. There is power in labor. The world has changed and the world continues to change. Guyana's changed and Guyana continues to change. Today in Guyana, we are moving into the oil and gas economy. But today in Guyana, accompanying that change is also another change. It is that we have a predatory government that is there ready to appropriate the newfound wealth and to distribute it to those who own and control whatever wealth there is in Guyana. Today we have a government that is squandering the gains that the workers won at the time of independence. We know now, 60 years after independence, that the promise to the working people has not been delivered. Labor still fights for meager salaries and wages. Unemployment is still rife. Our independence, given to us through the struggles of the workers, has not delivered for the workers. We move into the next 60 years of our independence. Workers who try to tear down the walls, the authoritarian walls, the dictatorial walls. We've always had to fight the dictatorship of the colonial era, the dictatorship of the post-colonial era. Our workers have not only had to fight for wages and salaries, but they've had to fight for the democratization of the state and society. And the little gains that they were able to eke out in the first years of independence, those gains, those democratic gains, are being taken away. We are in the presence of another wave of authoritarianism. So argue this show. So I am arguing. Don't use terms like creeping dictatorship and all that nonsense. Authoritarianism and dictatorial rule has been a constant in these colonial and post-colonial outposts. The question is, how have we been able to temper authoritarian rule? And I dare say that after a little break on the authoritarian state, not between 2015 and 2020, we did not get rid of the authoritarian state. What we were able to do was to put a brake on it, a brake on the authoritarian state. But no sooner had that government been removed. It was like removing the scales, and we return to the authoritarian state in its worst form. What is the role of the trade union in an authoritarian regime, under an authoritarian regime? I am making a distinction here between regime and government. Governments come and governments go. Regimes. The PPP used to say that the Burnham Constitution was a bad constitution. Yet, they never made an attempt to change it until the people took to the streets in 1997-98. That they tried to modify that constitution. The constitution represents the state. They wanted a change in government, but not a change in the regime, the authoritarian regime. What is the role of the trade union in today's regime, under today's regime, under today's authoritarian regime? Starbuck News and the others are asking, what is the role of the opposition leader? And they're saying the role of the opposition leader must be to make peace, to be responsible, not to be talking about going on the streets, but to be holding the government accountable. How the hell can you have a responsible opposition and not argue for a responsible government? You are cocking people and you think that we are fools. You're arguing for a responsible opposition, and you have a damn irresponsible government. You all hear me? You all hear me? That's what they want. Mr. Norton must talk about crossover votes. To hell with crossover votes. You want crossover wages and salaries. To cross over from the damn thieves to the workers. Crossover votes. What is the role of the trade union? Is the trade union still relevant? Someone asked the question a few weeks ago, why are the trade unions not fighting harder for wages and salaries under the budget that they passed there? It was a budget for capital, not a budget for workers. And you know, as usual, the leaders had their talk in the newspaper. Two of my guests here argue, but when their argument was finished, the trade unions got the message. You gotta fight for the workers. You gotta fight the trade union. That's my view. And you have to recognize that the fight changes as the society changes. I remember my brother Walter Rodney arguing in 1979, talking about political strike. He said, every strike is a political strike because you're striking against the political bosses. It's not a partisan strike, it's a political strike. Is the trade union still relevant? Is the trade union the role of the trade union to just be talking about 5% raise to the workers, or should the trade unions be talking about a universal basic income for workers? That's what we want to talk about tonight. Because fired up. The guests that I bring on this program, some of them are my friends, some of them are my comrades. But I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in speaking truth to power. I don't want people to come on the program and to make excuses. We've got to face the reality. Within the trade union, the role of the trade union in contemporary society. Sisters and brothers, I present to you my panel tonight. My friend, Lincoln Lewis. My friend, brother, and comrade, Takumo Ogunse. My friend, brother, and comrade, Norris Witter. In the latter days of the PPP, a lot of people don't remember when the organized opposition has thrown their hands in the air and conceded the PPP will never be removed. There were about 3 or 4 or 5 of us used to be on the streets. Lincoln Lewis, Norris Witter, that same bad fashion one, I'm not going to call his name. Mark Benchop was one of us. Gerard Ramsarup was one of us. And we used to be on the streets holding the PPP to the fire, the government. You know, so Norris Witter is not just a fly-by-night person. Gentlemen, welcome to Politics 101.
It's a pleasure to be on the program with these distinguished panelists.
Norris?
Thank you, Dr. Hines, for inviting me. And may I extend warm greetings to the viewing public.
And Mr. Lincoln Lewis.
I tell you, call me Comrade. Comrade Lewis. Don't call me the same things that you are calling. Don't give me the same salutation that the oppressors do have.
My brother, Comrade.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for inviting me.
You take the new ball, Norris. Roy Fredericks, you're taking the new ball this afternoon. There was a discussion between your 2 co-panelists a few weeks ago on why the trade unions have not been more aggressive in challenging the government for not putting more benefits for labor in the budget. Norris Witter, was that a fair question? Norris, go ahead.
Okay. Sometimes it is not whether a question is fair or not, but it is the timing of the question and the context within which that question was raised. I think that very often one tends to take lightly the battering that the labor movement has had over the years. And it may appear to many to be a very simple thing for a union, for instance, as like in the presentation of a budget that you rightly classified as being anti-working class for the labor movement or the progressive arm of the movement to take a knee-jerk response to that budget. I believe any knee-jerk response would not do justice to the working people. What is required is a careful analysis of the budget, a careful analysis and evaluation of where labor is at this present point in time, and what can be the most appropriate time for an intervention to be made. Now, I think all of us by now are aware that we are dealing with a regime that does not respond to, well, letters in the press, does not respond to entreaties. It is a regime that only responds when they are pressured. And therefore, any response, any effective response from labor in relation to a budget that does not meet the expectation of the workers must be a carefully calculated response that is designed to mount a robust and continuous struggle to address such a situation. Now, any one-off activity or a few letters in the press would never result in the kind of response that one would expect. And therefore, what one has to do is to carefully use whatever tools of analysis you have to determine at what time an intervention should be made, what kind of intervention needs to be made, and how are you going to sustain that kind of intervention until your objectives, whether short, medium, and long term, are realized. You have to, whatever you do, have to take into account the nature of the creature that you are dealing with.
That's Mr. Norris Witterdale. Let me bring in Mr. Takumo Ogunse. Can you guys mute your microphone when you're not on? Because we're getting some feedback. Mr. Moderator, can you please help us here? Takumo Ogunse, let me bring you in. When you raised that question, what did you have in mind? What drove you to raise that question about the trade union response to the budget?
Firstly, I want to say that as a person who have been historically associated with the workers' movement for many decades, I have a very good understanding of the evolution of the movement and the difficulties that the movement face. And I make a distinction between different forms of struggle. I have listened to Brother Witter, which I will respond to a little later. But to answer your question, upfront, I was concerned that the trade union movement have a good understanding of what the PPP is about in terms of the workers. We had 23 years of them. I assume that the trade union movement is aware of the transformative effect of oil, and that oil and gas potential obviously created a situation where money, is not a serious issue as it used to be. I assume that the trade union movements are aware that the workers in this country for over 2 decades at least has been allotted pittance in terms of wages and salary. And I felt that the trade union movement is not dealing with budget for the first time in its history. I grew up knowing the trade unions annually, deal with this question of budget. And I was concerned that at this historical moment, when the government was spending the first chunk of the oil money to the tune of $552.9 billion, that they present a budget with no commitment to salaries for the public sector workers and no announcement of any significant increasement for workers in general. And I felt at the least unions leadership ought to do was to denounce the budget and its anti-working class nature, and to wage a campaign, of public opinion. There's a difference between a campaign to bring down, to win, the objective. I don't expect the workers in the present condition will able overnight and a snap of a hand wage the kind of struggle that Norris is referring to in order to bring the PPP in the government to book. But I refuse to accept that the trade union movement is in such a bad shape that its leaders cannot give a quick and speedy response to the budget, denouncing the anti-working class nature of the budget in the context of plenty in terms of money and resources. And that was my major concern.
Brother Lincoln? Was the trade union movement in general somewhat tardy in its initial response to the anti-working class nature of the budget?
Let me make the point that we are coming from different perspective and understanding of our role and the issues that confront us. In 1919, when the first institution of the family of the United Nations was established, was the ILO, where you have government, employer, and workers' organization, which is the trade union. And what they do, they recognize the importance of coming together to be involved in matters of national character and collective bargaining. And that is why you have, by 1948, you have had the Convention 87, we speak to freedom of association, and 98, we speak to collective right to collective bargaining. Over the years, you know what makes this country strong economically at a certain time of our history? Because we permitted collective bargaining. Under Roosevelt in the United States, it was collective bargaining that built a middle class. In Britain, it's the collective bargaining, right? Here, people are talking like the Kuma talks just now about an increase, as now been said. We are not interested in an increase. We are interested in the laws of this country being respected. The Constitution, which speaks to the right to collective bargaining. ILO Convention 98, which speaks to the right to collective bargaining. That was ratified. That was one of the first set of conventions, 87 and 98, were the first conventions of the ILO that were ratified in 1966, just after we got independence. What we want is collective bargaining. We don't want handouts. We don't want no government as an employer must sit down and say, we put in 30% or 10% on the side for workers. We are talking about, and that's why I'm going to tell you this, David. You describe it as a regime. It's regimes behave like that. During the previous government with headed by Granger and Nagamoto, they did the same damn thing to the trade union. And now they're never prepared to sit down with the trade union and do what ought to be done of collective bargaining. We are not interested in that. We are interested in collective bargaining and the respect for the laws of this country. Before the government, before the PPP regime, as you describe it, read the budget. We sent to the president, no other person but the president, a list of measures that we asked them to consider, and not one was considered. It is not, it's a regular thing. We have to, as a people, you talked prior to you asking us this question, your commentary, you spoke of what has been the role of the trade union over the years, what we have done. Let me tell you what. You talk about what happened in the region and what happened here. That you had the trade unions had political departments, right? It is not only that they had political departments, but those political departments morphed into political parties. And what you had at the national level was an ally, a political party movement had an ally to fight for them in the National Assembly and fight for them all the time. We could have called for that. With Desmond Hoyt in 1999, as late as 1999, if you remember, with the public service strike out there, he stood with the public service unions. The PNC was the ally. You don't have an ally. We don't have an ally. Let me give you why I'm saying that we don't have an ally. When the PPP was in opposition, all the things that they mouthed that they are going to do, when they come to government, they did the opposite. So we can't see them as an ally. We see them as political opportunists fighting just to get political power. Let me take you back. In 1963, when you had a strike that meet to the point where the PPP, when the Labour took on board, Labour had the political opposition who supported them. They had friends in the national arena who have done so. You had two worlds, you know. You had the socialist bloc and you have the West, right? You had friends and you could have straddled both blocks. Now you have one block. So the responses to Labour's call will be different to what you've had in 1963. But in 1963, the Guyana Agriculture and General Workers Union, GAU, was not the recognized union in the sugar industry. It was the MPCA. The public service union was the public service union. Today, you have a movement where some unions are prepared to support whatever this government does. Some are not prepared to take, some leaders are not prepared to take action. So the fracturing of the labor movement has contributed, and not only that, the fracturing must be put fair and squarely at the door of workers. We are conscious of what is taking place, but while workers are conscious of what is taking place, nobody wants to bell the cat. That's a problem we have. The politicians will run roughshod over us, over the workers, or cuss them out today, and tomorrow they call them, they run and they go. So don't blame the movement itself. Don't blame the trade union. The trade union, I always say that rules and organization are dead at their hearts unless they're activated by people. And in the trade union, the power comes from the work. The trade union is not a top-down organization. And it is time workers recognize that. Political parties, many people, trade unions in their day-to-day activities are subjected to the laws of the land. A collective bargain agreement that you have signed, unless it is said in that agreement that you are not, that this is not legally binding, it is legally binding. You're Armstrong by rules.
Okay.
And these are things people must understand.
All right.
We cannot do the things. We cannot do the same thing every time.
Before I bring in the other panelists, you seem to have gotten yourself into a tangle here, according to Brother Ali Majid, who's making the point that collective bargaining and increase of wages are not mutually exclusive. Please clarify that. You don't mean to say because you said we are not interested in wages. We're interested in collective bargaining, and I don't mean. Go ahead.
Collective bargaining is the process upon which you determine wages.
Okay, I know that
collective bargaining is the process, right. and the Constitution. The Constitution speaks specifically about collective bargaining, and none of governments want to respect that.
And thanks for that clarification, that you're not saying that it's one or the other. You're saying the one must lead the other. Brother Norris, let me bring you back in here and start with this question. In the light of the new oil and gas economy, and in light of the dictatorship that we have over Guyana, in the light of those two developments, what is the role of the trade union? And that question is for all three panelists.
Now, let me put your question in context, right?
Yes.
The objectives of the universal objective of the labor movement is immutable. It is constant. It will never change. That is to promote, protect, and preserve the interests, welfare, and well-being of its members, right? Now, let me now look at those objectives in relation to the issue you have raised, that is the emerging oil and gas industry. Now, within recent times, since the passage of the National Resources Fund bill in December last year, the government moved swiftly to have that bill signed into law, assented to by President Ali. And thereafter, the National Resources Fund was raided, right? I wonder how many persons are aware that that fund represented approximately 19% or thereabout of the national budget, right? And everyone must be aware that a budget, among other things, will determine who gets what, when, and how. For instance, how wage and salary earners will be compensated, right? And what level of taxation those persons who are trapped within the tax net, how they will be treated. Therefore, that being said, the labor movement must perforce have an interest, because the percentage of the oil revenue towards the national budget will continue to increase. It may very well at some point in time within the near future be as much as 70 to 80% of the national budget. And therefore, we must perforce have an interest in ensuring, because this oil, as like any other resource, belongs to the people of this country. It doesn't belong to the PP or any political party. It is the patronage of the people of this country. And therefore, we must ensure that the earnings derived from oil is spent in the interest of the people. And the working people makes up the bulk of the citizenry of this country. Therefore, we have more than a passing interest in not only monitoring what is happening with the oil and gas resources, but we must also ensure that it is spent in the interest of the working people.
Brother Takuma, the role of the trade union in the context of the emerging oil and gas economy and the presence of authoritarianism. Brother Takuma? If Takuma is not with us, can we get Brother Lincoln to come in on that question? The role of the trade union in the context of dictatorship and the emerging oil and gas economy?
I'm not sure if you're hearing me. I heard the question. Are you hearing me? I'm not sure if you're hearing me. Am I on? I'm here. I'm seeing you.
Yes, we are hearing you, Takuma.
Okay, that's what I want to know. I want to say that we are debating in a very strange way. I have never wrote or said that the trade union movement must give up collective bargaining. My point was simple, is that to denounce the anti-working class nature of the budget based on the fact that the government didn't indicate anything for public service, workers and workers in general, to me, is a straightforward matter. It doesn't involve surrendering the right to collective bargaining. I didn't argue that government must fix the percentage for workers. Anyway, let me go to the question that you asked. I want to start with the latter one first. I think that the trade union movement in its evolution in Guyana, have contributed, as you yourself in your introduction, and Lincoln himself articulate, had played a tremendous role outside the limits of simple collective bargaining and industrial relations, and they have made a major contribution to political city development in the country and the question of governance. And they have contributed significantly to the democratic evolution of the society. And I think that the trade union movements at this historical juncture has to return to that political tenet. It is not in contradiction with the role, as representatives of labor in the industrial relations situation, but they have a historical obligation to influence, how governance unfold in the country. And since all of them concede the nature of the PPP and they concede the nature of what the workers are facing, by extension, the entire society. To me, it is only logical that the trade union movements have to find ways and means to work with the wider citizens to bring tremendous pressure to be bear on this government for the renovation of governance that could transform the structural limitations and the political limitations at their site. And I think that they're not going to get to where they want to get to have a reliable political ally, unless we as a country, okay, destroy the winner-take-all political system and have in place a more democratic and more consultatory kind of democracy, in which there are no winners and there's no losers. So I think it's in the interest of the trade union movements, the membership, and the entire country, for the labor unions, just like political parties, just like civic society forces, just like individual Guyanese, to recognize that we have to crush this dictatorial attempt by the PPP, because it is unprecedented in the sense that it is being now driven by tremendous wealth. And if we don't act swiftly, it will destroy all of us. On the question of oil, I'm be very simple. I don't think there have to be any big convincing of trade union movements, leaders, and the workers that with this tremendous amount of potential wealth, actual and potential wealth, that workers have to make the claim on this, because the question of workers' interests is a question of priority. And if the workers and their leadership don't find a way of coming into the streets, okay, and make their position known, not only to the government, but to the wider country, so that you could extend your solidarity among the wider populace, the region and the world, that you intend, okay, to fight in an unprecedented way, given in spite of your present weaknesses. I know all the weaknesses, I know all the limitations, and sometimes we too get too caught up in winning. You want to win even before you fight. So all I'm saying, and I'm following the logic of workers, because workers speak to me. You go around the country and ask workers with a view about the trade union movement and the leadership and the approach to struggle, it is very clear. But I accept that we as leaders have to be more strategic. We have to be more clinical. But there could be no victory without struggle.
Brother Lincoln, please come in on that question. And can I ask the panelists, when you're not on, please mute your mic. Please mute your mic. We're getting some tremendous feedback. Mute your mic when you're not on. Lincoln, the role of the trade union in the context of oil and gas and dictatorship.
Let me say to you that, to the viewers, let me make this point. The trade union has a responsibility to influence the economic, social, and political issues in society. We have that responsibility. We have been discharging it. We have been discharging it. When everybody was talking, many people on many of the panels said, scrap the Constitution. We have been saying it's not the Constitution the problem. Put laws in place to beef up what the Constitution says. I'm recognizing now that some of the people who said the Constitution no damn good, scrap it, are now saying that the Constitution is the most progressive document you can find around. Let me tell you what. I listened to Takuma. Let me tell you something. 1980 Constitution speaks about the regional system. And they had, since they spoke of the regional system, from them to 1980 to now, 77 of the Constitution speak to about the region shall prepare its economic plan and it shall be funded by the central government. He never said they can cut it. He never said that. Not one piece legislation went to Parliament since then, and we have been asking for it all the time. We have been asking for it years now. Put legislation to beef up what you have.
And if I may come in, the question is, what is the role of the trade union in the
yes, I understand. Boy, David, you're the moderator. I am just responding to something that things that you said you don't like the debate. So we debated this matter, right? We're debating what we said. I understand what you're saying. I'm coming to that point.
I want us to answer questions for the
audience. I understand you, but what you're doing is putting on cuff on me and you're just like this government.
Well, I hope I'm not.
Let's be working with the things now.
I hope I'm not doing the handcuffing like the government. But I want you to answer the question because the audience is interested.
I want to tell you this. I want to tell you something. Let me tell you something. We have been arguing how much to pay. We have an interest in it. And we have said from the outset, if we get in $20, we must sit down as a country, as the people here, all of us, and say, oh, this money must be spent. The government, when they were in opposition, they say what we get in is too little bit, renegotiate. When they come to power, they say they don't negotiate anymore. But what we have not done is to hold them accountable on the question of how we're going to spend that money. If we are talking about oil from gas to shore project, these are things that must be placed in front of the national leaders. Let me discuss this thing. Is it feasible or not? These are type of things that we need to discuss when we come to oil and gas. We have spoken about it. We read the president about it. Said these matters must be discussed. We said we said to the president by way of letter that the contract that was signed by Janet Jagan, what's his name, Raphael Trotman, all those agreements must be placed in the National Assembly and let the leaders discuss them. Let the parliament discuss. There is decision making. And even the agreements that were done by Ramotar, like the blacks and what have you, that those things must be put there. It's not that we have glossed over them. We write no other person than the president to talk about it. The question of the sharing of whatever we get, let us look at. We read Mr. Granger when he was president about it, right? We have constantly been pursuing this issue of oil. But we are expecting a number of things we can do. There are some things we can't do. They're outside of our thing. Let me give you an example. Exxon will not get more than about 60 workers on one ship, on one boat. The platforms that who are supplying labor, are private contractors. A number of them are not Guyanese. The ownership is not Guyanese. In this case here, if you're going to organize them into the trade union, you will end up with a number of employers. And that's what people need to know. You end up with a number of employers. But what has happened, there are two things I want to say about this. Efforts have been made by both Norris and myself, where we have gone down there to try to organize those people. On one occasion, we used the electronic media to talk to them individually by writing them letters. I know what they did. They wrote back the union and tell the union they want nothing to do with trade union. And this is 100 and something people. But when they get themselves in problems, they run down to where I am or where Norris is to tell Norris, to tell us what the problems are. This brings me back to the point that Takuma made earlier. It's a question here where we are not prepared, where a number of persons are not prepared to hold hands in solidarity and fight back. We got to fight. I recognize that.
Okay.
We have a serious problem.
Brother Lincoln, the comments are coming in. Lincoln, history is very important. Can you answer the question, please? Lincoln.
But I answer the question.
Lincoln has been skirting the issue of the trade unions. Answer the question.
What question you want me to answer?
Please answer the question. Stop avoiding the direct question. Lincoln, answer the question.
But what can we do? I told you already what we can do. It is important to us.
This is the
but while it's important to us,
let me ask this question.
You ask it.
What is the position, the question of a universal basic income in the context of the oil and gas economy has been put on the table by Professor Clive Thomas and the WP. Where do we stand? Both as individual unionists and activists. And
stand on what?
We stand on the universal basic income proposal proposed by Clive Thomas and the WP. I start with you, Norris Witter.
You are asking a straight question now. What you asked before is not what you're asking now, David.
No, I asked before what's the role
of this, not what you're asking now. I answered what you said before, but you want to know about cash transfer. I know what you want to talk about. You want to talk about tax transfer. We have made our position very clear on the question of tax transfer. Therefore, let me just hold on. There are 4 areas we want to see operate.
Yeah.
One, monies must be there for the what we call stabilizing our budget. Monies must be there for wet weathers down the road. You can't spend out all now. We must fix things like the NIS. We must fix the health services and education. We have made those positions very clear. Right? We have to fix those 5 areas.
As the TUC discussed,
whatever money we get, we got to fix them now.
As the TUC
and all these things that they are doing with the oil money, all the other things that they are doing with the oil money, we must carry them to the National Assembly. Don't just use the money like that.
Okay. As the TUC discussed the idea of universal basic income, if not, what is your personal position?
When you say universal basic income, what do you mean?
The idea of the cash transfer that there must be a basic income that is paid to workers. What they loosely call the cash transfer.
You see, here again, I'm going to tell you, if you read us all the time, when Clive Thomas came out with that position, we said to them that, look, we can use at least starting for the question of the cash transfer, activate the unemployment benefit that is in the NIS, and let's start there. We said that. And I get the impression that people are reading what we've been saying all the time.
Well, we are assuming that over time people forget things. That's why we do these programs. All you have to do is answer the question.
That's where we are.
Is Norris Witter on?
Hello?
Yeah, Norris, you're in the dark. We can't see you.
Okay. The issue of the are you see me?
Yes.
Yes, the issue of the cash transfer, as Lincoln said, we support that 101%. But I would like to say this, is that you are not going to get, as I said earlier, this regime to sit around the table to discuss and to agree on such proposals. Now, you know, one of the reasons why this regime is transgressing laws with impunity, it is purely because they are of the impression that civil society and even the opposition political parties are weak, and therefore they are exploiting the situation to its fullest. What we need to do, we have to, all organizations outside of the state apparatus, right? We need to assess our situation, and wherever there are kinks and weaknesses, to correct those weaknesses and to seek to build bridges, establish alliances, whether they are strategic alliances or whatever kind of alliances, right? Where our interests coincide, and build the kind of capacity that is required to respond, and I dare say, confront this regime. If we do not build the capacity to confront them, yes, sir, we are going to get no. We will talk until the cow comes home. Nothing is going to happen.
Norris, let me get this clear.
Yes, sir.
Are you saying that one of the roles of the trade union in contemporary society is to build bridges with the society organization, and second, confront the government? Are you saying that? Because you were saying the government. No, are we getting you right in that you're saying one of the roles of the trade unions in contemporary society is to build bridges with other like-minded organizations and create a broad front? That seems clear to me. Are you saying that if is not going to negotiate, then trade unions be part of a wider mass movement? Is it that's what you're saying?
Yeah, what I'm saying, right, is that they will, once the regime is determined to continue the dictatorial or authoritarian path, then the progressive forces must perforce decide where electoral politics ceases and political activism starts.
Yes, and that's what I want from you, to talk to me about the role of the trade union in that. I'm not, the political parties will speak for themselves.
Well, the trade union as a working class organization, right? If whenever it finds that a regime is carrying out anti-working class programs and policies, right, then the movement must work assiduously to remove such a regime.
That's a straight question I'm asking, and thanks very much for that very clear answer. Takumo Gunse, are you there? Takumo Gunse, are you there? Lincoln Lewis, is you there? Are you there? Yeah, go ahead, sorry. Is Lincoln Lewis there? Takumo Gunse?
Yes, one hour to make a point where
Lincoln, you've
let me understand. Let me just give you a few examples or something.
Okay, hold on, Lincoln. Lincoln, you've heard your brother trade union say two very clear things. One, that the trade unions must build alliances with other progressive organizations. Two, that in the presence of a dictatorship, the trade union must join a broad anti-dictatorial movement. Do you agree or disagree with those two propositions?
I hear you. Let me explain something to you. In 2018, November, the no confidence motion that was passed in the National Assembly. The trade union started a platform in civil society. The initiative was between the president of the TUC and myself. and we bring it on board. Where we went to civil society group and private sector, we started to say to them, we've been asking all the time for the implementation of Article 13 of the Constitution. We have an opportunity now to, because of this status that we have here, to force the political options to come to the table that we can make something real. Document was prepared. It is right now in my email. It was modified. We discussed a number of times with civil society and private sector. Everybody agreed. Suddenly, we moved from Article 13 being implemented, made real, to that must have election now. You are telling me, I have had the experience. What Norris is talking about is a direction that a trade union want to go. But can we trust the people who over the years we have worked with, and every time we get to a point we get sharp? We gotta be real. We live in a real society. Our society has to be different in this case. I believe that we always support governments that respect the laws, respect the rights of workers. We must not support any government who do not respect laws and respect the rights of workers. But I'm saying to you that only that's difficult in this society here, because in society will not be, many of them are not, the majority of them, civil society and the private sector, they are not. Make sure that the things we're talking about, right, rule of law, is being upheld. Whatever Norris is talking about, all rights, it's about the rule of law.
Brother Takuma, let me bring in Takuma.
Yes, I'm here.
As we move into another Labor Day, 2022, what message is there to from you, and I presumably from your party, as far as the workers are concerned? What is the message to the workers on this Labor Day, 2020?
Okay, the message is tied up with the question you posed earlier, which I think got lost, and I want to clarify it. The WPA has two proposals, okay, which we put into the country and to the workers. The Buxton proposal is about an annual cash transfer from oil revenue, okay, to each and every Guyanese household. That is separate from the idea of a universal basic wage. A universal basic wage is a monthly payment to all Guyanese workers, okay, that will allow every worker, working, unemployed, okay, private sector workers, everybody to have a minimum income that puts them above the poverty line. Okay, we also mentioned recommendations that the tax system could deal with those who really didn't deserve the money. But the point I'm trying to get here is we're talking about two separate and distinct policies from WPA point of view. And basically that is the message we want to pack and to sell to the workers at this May Day. That we are in a transformative economic situation where workers have to think big and think different. We have to abandon the trickle-down mentality, the economic trickle-down mentality that we have had for so many centuries and decades and so forth. And we have to develop conceptions of the future that we could eliminate poverty and to ensure that the next generation of Guyanese don't know nothing about poverty, because it is being predicted by the next 5 years, Guyana will going to produce more than 1 million barrels of oil per day, more oil per day than the entire population. And if we calculate for $75 a barrel, we can't even count the money. So what we want the country to understand, that we are at a transformative moment. And we want the workers and the unions and the leadership to understand, gone are the days of trickle-down economics. We're in the days of transformational economics, and we have to come up with policies to defend the interests of the working people. And one of the most important is to eliminate the scourge of poverty as the first priority. And that is the message we have for Labor Day for the Guyanese workers.
Maurice Victor, your Labor Day message to the workers of Guyana? Lincoln Lewis?
There has never been any progress without struggle, right? And for us to achieve the good life that we all seek, we must organize and we must agitate to change.
Lincoln Lewis, your Labor Day message to the workers of Guyana? We're not hearing you. We're not hearing you.
Aside that I have a message as General Secretary of the Congress, I have a message for workers. And I'm going to take it to them on Labor Day. But what I want them to know, you have to come out. You got to come. Those who are strong enough, got to come in the street. Come with your empty pots and empty pans. Come to beat them. Empty bags. Because the house economists can't go inside they can come out with 2-3 bags anymore. Half of one bag. The thing bad. Come out there with your empty pots, empty pans. Come and beat them on the road. Message for you on Labor Day. Let us understand that we have to all our fight. That's what we got to do. Takuma, you have your message. Organize, and you can bring a contingent. Join us. Let's understand. We want as many people to come and course. Let us fight together. If we don't fight together, don't swim together, we are going to separate.
Thank you very much, brothers. And I say that on this Labor Day, our workers must understand, as they have always understood, that their interests as workers are inextricably linked to the interests of the nation. Where goes the workers, goes the nation. And where goes the nation, go the workers. And in this era of big oil and the potential wealth for Guyana as we've never seen before, but in the context of a dictatorship that is prepared to not divide the bread equally, workers must fight on all fronts. They must fight as workers within their trade unions to push those unions to recognize that they must become militant in a time of dictatorship. They have no other choice. That they must not abandon the traditional fight for collective bargaining and for wages. But the collective bargaining must move beyond the floor of the form and the floor of the workplace. It must spill over into the wider society, because it is the workers who must carry the families. It's the workers who keep the economy going. Workers cannot be separated from the rest of the society. They are the majority. It's a new time. It's a new era. It's 60 years after independence. Collective bargaining must mean what it has always meant, but it must mean more. It must mean that once and for all, we must bargain collectively to end poverty. I hope that on May Day, the leaders of the workers will use that P word, poverty. Because if poverty is eradicated, then working class liberation will come. And when working class liberation comes, the trade union movement would have achieved what Critchlow and our founding fathers of the trade union always wanted us to achieve, and that is freedom. To free the workers from the bondage of cheap labor and cheap wages and move them into prosperity. That is my message for this Trade Union Day on May 1st. Militancy, militancy, militancy. Collective bargaining must move from its narrow confines and flow like a river overflowing its banks. And it must mean collective bargaining to end poverty. Tomorrow night, we're going to have Aubrey Norton on. You all turn out for that. Good night. See you all tomorrow night when the leader of the opposition will be here.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.